Hello there.
This is where the fun begins.
Hey there guys, Unofficial Star Wars here, hope you're all doing well. In this video we have our episode 4 Andor breakdown, as we're going to go ahead and break down all the different things that you may have missed throughout this episode, along with different Easter eggs, references, theories, and predictions towards the end of the video, so stay tuned for that there as well. This episode is titled Aldhani, hence the planet that this overall episode is taking place on, by which we later learn throughout this episode this is a mission that Andor is going on. Yes, this is technically his first rebel type of mission that he's going to be doing. So of course, in those regards, it's very exciting to see those true origins with this overall character. Knowing his character and how his character is mapped out, as in the sense of what happens throughout the events and throughout the movie Rogue One, is also something very interesting and heavily reminds me of the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi. As if for when this character was first introduced, we saw their death scene, so to kind of go back in a prequel type of era here and see more of his life and that led up to those events is something very cool. And just like how the first 3 episodes had kind of done here, this same episode, episode 4, is doing the same thing of where it leaves off directly from the previous episode, which I have to say is just something I absolutely love that the Andor show has been doing, and I wish they would do it with honestly some more Star Wars shows, such as maybe The Mandalorian. And of course, the opening scene does just that by leaving off from exactly where we left off in episode 3, having Luthen and Andor just escaped their home world, and after kind of going back and forth and off and on, if Andor wanted to actually join his cause of what the Rebel Alliance is going to be here, or want to be dropped off on another planet, or what the whole deal exactly was. Luthen does eventually reveal to Andor that he didn't ever actually go to meet with Andor about this Imperial box that he was trying to buy in episode 3 here, and that they were talking over, but much rather he was curious and wanting to have Cassian Andor actually join his team of rebels that we later see throughout this episode. Something else important that we see here during this entire sequence and scene is that Andor actually reveals that he has fought in a war, well, quote unquote, on the planet of Minbin, and this is something that Luthen directly just shoots down, saying that you didn't exactly fight on the front lines kind of like you're seeking it out to be, but rather you were just simply a cook. The importance of the planet of Minbin and during that battle and the war was the exact same planet that we see in Solo, a Star Wars story, when Han Solo joins the Empire in that whole muddy type of planet and is fighting with the Empire. So how cool is it to think that Andor and Han Solo have potentially actually met each other on that planet during those events is something so very cool to actually think about, and or at least how close they were to actually maybe potentially meeting is something very cool at the same time as well. Aside from that, we also see that Luthen reveals to Andor that he didn't actually fight on the front lines, as I had mentioned. It was simply just a cook that was in the back and kind of chilling. From there, we go to finally the planet of Coruscant. So many Star Wars fans are excited to finally see this planet once again here. Must I remind you guys that we've actually been able to see the planet of Coruscant 4 times this year of Star Wars. I mean, what a golden age for Star Wars, and to be a Star Wars fan at the same time is so exciting. We've seen the planet of Coruscant in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, in the Book of Boba Fett, and Tales of the Jedi that's going to be releasing on October 26th on Disney+, and now in the Andor show is something so cool because this is such a memorable and fan favorite planet from the early 2000s prequel movies. It is from here where as I had predicted in our preview video for episode 4 of Andor, that we would be introduced to the character of Dedra Meero, and so we finally were. She's much like an Imperial ISB agent that is working on a top tier list of what the Empire is exactly doing regarding its different rankings, and with the officers that have full control and insights to their specific sectors. And so as we do see throughout the scene, it's in a meeting in between different Imperial officers and high-ranking officers and their different sectors, kind of like a quarterly check-in type of thing. In those regards, it isn't the most exciting thing, aside from the fact that they do reference and mention the whole incident that had went on through the first 3 episodes of the Andor show regarding in episode 1, as Cassian Andor had shot the 2 corporal officers, and then all the way to the events of episode 3 with all the different corporal officers, including Cyril Karn, who we'll see in just a moment, had gone to the planet to try to track down and bring Andor to justice. Now, we should remember that the Imperials are simply doing what they're meant to do. They're not necessarily being bad guys at this point in time, although I will say they are quite harsh and rough, especially to Tim, who we saw in episode 3 lose his life. When you do take a step back and truly think about it and look at it, it's really Andor who is the true villain for it as of right now. However, I think by the end of this first season with the Andor show, the air will be cleared and that he will actually made out to be more of a better guy. From here we go back to Andor. He's freshly shaved, maybe to kind of hide his identity identity a little bit, although I do prefer his look with the beard. He just looks cooler and everything like that. Anyway, saying that's not very important, we're here on the planet of Aldani, as I had mentioned at the beginning of this video, is the title of the episode. This is here where Luthen is going to meet with the group of the Rebel Alliance, so to speak, for as of right now, at least, although there isn't entirely that much of a leader going on here with the different, I guess, segments and quadrants and squadrons of rebels. Something to keep in mind is that the Rebel Alliance isn't all that much of a thing here during this time in the Star Wars universe, but much rather is actually a circulating thing that is more separated into different squadrons and parts of the galaxy. I think is the best possible way to put it. Little pockets, so to speak, here throughout the galaxy. For one example, you'd have Luthen and his kind of squadron of rebels that we have featured in this episode, and for another thing, we have a group of squadron and pocket of rebels that are going to be introduced later on in this show here. That would be Saw Gerreras and so forth and so on. These different kind of squadrons and pockets of rebels don't exactly know each other exist all that much until at least we see them in the original trilogy, or at least most of them probably. They're simply all fighting for the same cause of the fact that they don't like the Empire. They just don't exactly know it yet. This scene right here is insanely important and cool at the same time, as Luthen presents Andor with a kyber crystal that he could use to sell it for credit in case he gets into a sticky situation, but at the same time is mentioning to him that it's very terribly important to Luthen and that he does want it back by the end of this mission. It's simply kind of like a keepsake type of thing, and also in the same sense that you can kind of look at Luthen almost like a father figure to some type of an extent here for Andor when it comes to everything like this, because he wants to see Andor again here. He wants Andor to give Luthen back his kyber crystal, but also the same idea in the fact that this is a kyber crystal, and kyber crystals are meant for two things. For the most known reason is the fact that they do actually power lightsabers that we see mostly in the prequel trilogy with the Republic and the Jedi Order and everything like that. So this does spark on the potential theories and speculations and ideas and everything like that, that for option A, Luthen is force sensitive and was previously a Jedi before, or option B, he picked it off of somebody, or option C is that he knew a force user slash Jedi previously before the events of Order 66 and the rise of the Empire. This is something I want to talk about and go more in depth into a separate future video here on the channel, because there's so many different directions that this can go, and as a Star Wars fan, it of course is my duty to go ahead and over speculate and over theorize on this type of stuff because I find it simply fun. It is from here where we have Luthen exit the ship and go and talk to his quote-unquote rebel leader of this squadron slash pocket of the Rebel Alliance in this part of the galaxy here. Her name is Vel, and she's very off on the whole idea and concept of bringing on, for one thing, another member. For one thing is very sketchy, and for another thing, having Andor be that person is another thing. Like, why him? What makes him so great? Why should we bring him on last minute? She does mention that they have planning this entire mission here for the last 5 months at this point in time, which is kind of hard to predict, and it's kind of thrown up in the air because what kind of concept of time do they use in the Star Wars galaxy when it comes to those types of questions? Anyway, I might actually talk about that in a different video here on the channel, so be on the lookout for that by hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell. Importantly enough, Val is trying to kind of come up with the whole idea of why this guy and why are you presenting to him now, because we are so far into this mission and it's about to go down in the next 3 days here as well. Luthen doesn't think that they can complete this mission without the help of Andor, and this heavily does remind me and ply into the facts of the MCU with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Take it back to 2016 with Captain America Civil War, where Tony Stark introduces Peter Parker slash Spider-Man to the whole idea and the reference of everything that's going on there in that movie. Like, hey, we want to bring you onto the Avengers because you have superhero powers. It's kind of like the same thing here that we can see with Luthen and Andor. I mean, Andor is being picked out by Luthen because of his abilities of being able to be completely ruthless, shoot, kill, get in, and be kind of that spy that they heavily do need for this mission. We also see Andor go underneath the codename slash nickname of Clem. This is to hide his true identity because he is, for one thing, a wanted man, and for another thing, it seems as though that Luthen thinks that this group of rebels can be kind of unpredictable here at the same time, and that they wouldn't want to work with somebody that would be high profile, such as Andor, that is heavily wanted by the Empire as of right now. And so on top of that, speaking of the Empire and what's going on with them, we see Cyril and the rest of their kind of sector get torn a completely new one by the ISB agent officer, explaining to them that everything that went wrong on their mission to Ferrix, how it was a made-up mission for another thing, how it was unnecessary and caused too much commotion for another. This does change the way that the Empire does outlook on how they have their missions ran, beforehand, it seemed to be so a little bit sloppy and that anybody could be a leader in this kind of case, and by which they have deemed it so they can't go ahead and have anybody go off onto these types of missions because they just want to, and much rather they have these new officers that are in these white kind of clothings, as we had seen here with this one guy that's yelling at them all and telling them that he's going to be kind of now underneath their sector here, overseeing everything and bringing it back to the higher rankings of the Empire. We even got a reference for the Emperor Palpatine, but this could also be higher rankings such as Emperor Palpatine, as I had just mentioned, and the same thing for Darth Vader. It's also the same scene of where we see Syril Karn and the rest of these guys get defected from the Empire duties for at least as of right now. This is, who's to say that these guys aren't to return anytime soon? I think it could very well happen. However, it's kind of up in the air and we just don't know. Telling from promotional pictures, spoiler alert, Syril Karn will return once again here. However, not completely entirely in the Imperial uniform there. I came out recently with a theory video talking about how Syril Karn will leave the Empire and go to join the actual Rebel Alliance here with Andor. However, I'm not completely sure and it's up in the air because we just don't know. It's a theory, so go check that video out. I'd also like to mention heavily on how we see Syril Karn just completely emotionless throughout this entirety of this whole episode here. Same thing for at the end of episode 3 here. After they lose, they don't get the bad guys, in this case Luthen and Andor here, the rebels, and they lost, and at what cost? He knows he's in like some deep trouble here, so he's just totally emotionless. The performance of Kyle Soller, who plays this character of Syril Karn, is totally on point. He's phenomenal and amazing. Same thing goes for everybody in this show. The acting is on point and amazing for this overall show. It really draws you into the whole aspect of the Star Wars universe. Aside from all that, from here we go ahead and catch up with Vel and Andor and what they're doing here. They're still walking. It's quite a long walk for them to go ahead and get to their kind of little rebel base there, their little rebel camp there, so to speak there. So there's a lot of chitter chatter kind of going on between these people. Before that, of course, they're gone ahead and there's a TIE fighter that flies by as they have to go ahead and hide. Different patrols of Empires is kind of being seen here as well. Also a TIE fighter. Oh my gosh, that is so cool to see. However, as I had mentioned in this scene here, Andor and Vel are talking a little bit back and forth. Importantly enough, Vel goes ahead and reveals to Andor that Luthen lied to him about them going ahead and sneaking into a payroll type of sector here for the Empire and taking that and stealing that. So, like, payroll information, like, really, who wants that? What good is that going to do for the Rebel Alliance? But much rather, they're actually in there to steal gear and actual, like, an armory, essentially, from the Empire. From there, we go back to Dedra Meero, who's kind of finding out some information surrounding the case here for the whole incident that went on in episode 3 of Andor regarding around the planet of Ferrix. I am a little bit interested and curious as to why she's looking so far into it and thinks that she needs some type of control over this whole case, because one of the ships that they found there at this whole scene was a missing ship that belonged to her sector there. So she finds it important that she needs to go ahead and actually like get control a little bit of this case here and kind of like using it as an entry point. There's different reasons that this could be as of why. For option A, she's an undercover rebel spy, is as of what I was kind of thinking here with her overall character. Or option B, for another thing, is the fact that she simply does truly care a lot about her job, much like we see with Syril Karn, and that she does want to know more about this overall case so she can put it on her portfolio or whatever the case may be, much like we see with Syril Karn. From there we go to Luthen, who's putting on a weird disguise here type of thing, changing up his look a little bit, putting a wig on, and this is so he can go meet with Mon Mothma. As I had talked about in my preview video from yesterday, I had actually thought this to be some type of flashback, because obviously he looks completely different with a different hairstyle and everything like that. He dresses himself up so he can put on a little bit of a disguise because he knows that Mon Mothma is heavily under watch from the Imperials. So while he does still go by the name of Luthen, which I find very interesting and fascinating, it is kind of like known out there. Maybe Luthen is like a known person out there and he has like a picture of him in his different type of look. We then have a scene of where Vel explains to Andor about how there are tribal natives that live here on this planet of Aldhani and that they're at one of the camps, so kind of where they take a little bit of a rest spot here. But she explains to them that the Empire had actually taken them out, like pushed them south away from their original areas of where they have lived, and this is because of the armory that this rebel crew plans to attack. Probably something we're going to be seeing here in episode 5 next week here with the Andor show, and how exactly these different Imperial facilities, and in this case such as the armory, has actually pushed these native people out of their own living areas. From there we have a scene of where Dedra Meero is confronting this other Imperial officer about the sector information regarding on Ferrix, how one of the ships from her sector was actually found on Ferrix, and that she would like some type of access to this entirety of this case. Now, as I had mentioned before, whether or not because of this is that she's simply just a good soldier following orders, much like kind of like we see with Cyril Karn, and he just wants to do the best possible thing, or if it's because she's a rebel spy, or maybe she's trying to build a portfolio, whatever the case may be, we just don't know. Nighttime falls, and in the morning we are introduced to the rebel crew that Vel and Andor have been traveling towards. When they arrive, of course, and much like Vel had that same reaction when Luthen introduced, well, now known as Clem, to the rest of the crew, they all have a negative reaction about it. Why are you introducing, you know, new people so far into this mission? We're about to go underway in like the next 3 days here, and this has been a thing and a process that's been going on for the last 5 months. Why bring somebody on last minute? And out of all people, why him? What makes him so special? She warms them all up to the idea, of course, after a lot of arguing kind of type of thing back and forth, and from there, that is that. Something this show does, as I had mentioned previously before in other breakdown videos, and as well as earlier on in this video, is the way that the Andor show is humanizing its characters. After Cyril is defected from the Imperials, or at least maybe some type of leave, who's to say if he's going to come back, we don't know. He goes back to his mom's house, who we can assume he hasn't really been keeping in touch with all that much, as she's angry and upset at first that he hasn't been, you know, calling or anything like that, writing, and then she of course accepts him in, and it's just very silent, and he's like still in that kind of shock state from when we saw him in episode 3 after Andor and Luthen had escaped and everything like that. Other than all that, I just really love the way that the show humanizes and like character builds just everyday normal people, something that kind of like the Book of Boba Fett was kind of sparking at the idea with, like humanizing characters and having them have like traumatic experiences in their past. With Book of Boba Fett, Boba was having those flashbacks every time he was in the Bacta tank, so it's just kind of one of those things, something I really enjoy. From there we go back to Luthen and what's going on with him. He's going to meet with Mon Mothma, and of course he has his little like assistant that's also there to help buffer the Imperial agent that is like kind of following around Mon Mothma. This is for security reasons and the recent rebel activity that's been going on there. They don't believe that she's doing anything wrong or anything bad, but of course Luthen and Mon Mothma have to go into the back and talk a little bit about what's going on with them and their deal. And what their deal is, this is something that we saw in the preview video actually with an exclusive clip of episode 4 that we covered yesterday here on the channel regarding all that. What is Mon Mothma contributing here to the Rebel Alliance? Well, at least during this time, something that we know in the, for one thing, the Rogue One movie that we see later on in the whole kind of quote-unquote Rogue verse, so to speak here, much like kind of comparable to the Mandoverse and all the Mandalorian shows, the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Star Wars Skeleton Crew, everything like that. People are calling this the Rogue verse. Anyway, aside from seeing the political power that Mon Mothma currently has as a Republic senator, much like, well, an Imperial senator in this case, however, she also kind of seems to be like funding this whole thing that Luthen has going on here. And he asks her when they get to the back, where's the money, where are the funds, type of thing. Are you having issues with pulling the funds from, well, the Empire here is where they're stealing this money from, much like a Robin Hood case, which is something I really love, is what we're kind of also predicting. For another thing, she mentions that everything is on high security, high alert, and this is probably after the whole incident that went on at Ferrix. You have 2 corporals that are dead in episode 1, 2 Imperial agents that are dead in episode 1, and then for another thing, I think that they mentioned that they have 5 to 7 casualties from episode 3 there, and that whole like speeder that blew up there as well. She does mention that she has somebody that she wants to bring on board to help her like smuggle this money away. It really does remind me quite a bit of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, if you guys have ever seen those shows. Who to say that who she might introduce here and bring on board here to help her kind of smuggle these funds from the Empire to give to the Rebel Alliance here. It's unknown, it's up in the air, but fans' theories and speculations would point at option A, never say never, Jar Jar Binks, or more likely would probably be Bail Organa, or it could even be an entirely new character, who's to say. As we head back over to what Andor's doing with Vel and the rest of the Rebel Alliance here, or at least this Rebel pocket here, we have a guy come off on a speeder, and he's in a Imperial uniform and everything like that. This guy is a part of their alliance here, and he's actually undercover and working in this like Imperial armory here as well, which is something so very cool, and he's kind of like the man inside and everything like that, so helping towards this cause. And of course he has his own quandaries and questions about why are you bringing on a new person so quickly. We're about to execute this entire thing in the next 3 days, and we've been at it for the last 5 months, so why now, why him type of deal. They all talk it through, figure it out, get over it. From there, we head back to Mon Mothma and everything that she's doing. She's now at her royal home, so to speak here. Her fancy little, like, quarters or homestead is what I'm presuming and guessing. And we see that I'm either guessing option A is her significant other, just by the way that they're talking and kind of snarly at each other, or maybe it could be her butler. I don't completely know. It could even be another senator that she's, like, living with in the same living quarters. We don't know. He's putting together a dinner and, like, a dinner party here that she had agreed to a couple of months ago, too, with other senators and political figures. Mon most of by which she just doesn't like very much. And once again, humanizing your characters there and kind of putting them into those Star Wars politics for another thing is something so many Star Wars fans love, is Star Wars politics. The entirety of Star Wars: The Clone Wars animated show, and same thing for a lot of the prequel movies there, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, is something so cool that Star Wars fans love. From there, we head back to Andor and his crew with the other rebels here, and they're kind of mapping out this entire mission with a cool little diagram that's made out of sticks. I have to say, it's really well made, being made out of sticks. They talk about the overall plan, but most importantly about the distraction plan of how there's like a meteor shower, essentially, is what they explain, and everybody, including the natives and the tribal people, go and watch it. And the same thing can be implied for the Imperials, is that they would go watch it as well, or at least oversee the like natives and the tribal people there, because it's the Empire and they're overly protective and demanding. From there, we have Dedra Romero and the other officer meet with like the Grand Officer. I'm not sure of any of the other officers' names, it's not really specified all that much, but they're kind of arguing over the whole fact that Dedra Romero wants some type of power or oversight over the whole Ferrex case and everything that's going on with it regarding her one lone ship being involved in it there as well. It's kind of also introducing the whole aspects of, well, what's going on with the rebels with Mon Mothma and all of those politics, but also what's going on with the Imperials and kind of like those insights in politics and everything like that. At this point, I'm still just not sure on what's going on with Dedra Medro, whether or not she's like an undercover rebel spy, or if she really just has those regards and those means to be, well, the best worker possible, much like Cyril. From there, the rebel group is having a little bit of a dinner over some campfire, and they're going over the plan a little bit more when one of the officers brings out a like template. I'm guessing this is like an insight map of everything, like key points and key coordinates inside this armory, this Imperial base that they want Andor to figure out and study, and he needs to know it by, well, the following morning. This is probably where the next episode is going to lead directly off from. Something I have countlessly mentioned that I just love about this show is the way that there's no gap time, much like my teeth, and that each episode follows in directly with one another is so cool and really brings you closer together with those characters. And that concludes our episode breakdown regarding all Easter eggs and potential things that you may have missed throughout this episode, and also different references here as well throughout Andor episode 4, of course, with a few theories and predictions and speculations sprinkled out throughout this entirety of this video here as well. This is something I'll be talking about and going more in depth into separate future videos here on the channel here at the same time as well. So hit the subscribe button and join us here today, and notification bell to be notified for when those videos come out. We also cover all types of other related Star Wars news, leaks, rumors, theories, and breakdowns here on the channel as well. So if you guys are into any of that there as well, you've found the right place. Hit the subscribe button and join us here today. I think it goes with just about saying, I want to know all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. What do you guys think here about Andor episode 4? Anything that I might have missed regarding different things that you guys may have missed throughout this episode, references, anything like that. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Leave a like in the video if you did enjoy it, as it really does help with the channel, and check out Instagram, Unofficial Star Wars, for more Star Wars content linked down in the description down below. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. This has been Unofficial Star Wars, and thanks so much for watching today's video. Peace out.